Hello. So this is a slide deck I pulled together for the Ancient Coin Club of Los Angeles. I thought I'd go back and make a quick recording in case anyone was interested in watching it. So the talk is on Roman Vota. This is a reverse uh, during the imperial period under Augustus. There were several references to Roman Vota reverses during the Republican period, but those are really just misinterpretations of hyphenated legends, very easy to confuse. So they really just started during the imperial period under Augustus. My goal here is to give you a high-level introduction to the types, the general vocabulary, and of course the many changes that occurred over the centuries these coins were issued. The photo here is of the aqueduct at Merida, Spain, which is ancient Emerita Augustus, founded in 25 BC. At the time, this was the closest I had been to Cordoba, Spain, where several of these initial coins were issued. So I went ahead and used that as my cover slide. If you do happen to go to Cordoba, which I highly would recommend, you can see many of the sites, including the Mesquita. And then if you're interested in Roman sites, of course, you can visit the temple, which was discovered within the last 100 years, and the columns were re-erected here. Underneath it is the archaeological museum, which is small but very respectable and enjoyable. You have the Roman Bridge, which is the longest Roman bridge still in use. It's over a kilometer. It's a very nice walk, and then there's a little fortress on the other end, which you can't see, which is behind this picture. And then, of course, the food is outstanding, as it is in most places in Spain. So you have the sal morejo, which is a tomato soup, cold, but not gazpacho. Definitely not gazpacho. Much more hearty. And then the pastries, most notably the pastel Cordobas, which is a very nice crust on the bottom, crust on top, and then a fruit filling of some sort. So very good. So back to the topic at hand. Um, there are not as many references to voter reverses as you might think for coin reverse that existed for hundreds of years. Um, the most obvious one that I found was by Harold Mattingly. He had a series of articles back in the 1950s. He did a very good job of listing the coins by emperor. There's some excellent endnotes and references to the academic literature, including interpretations of texts in or connections to texts in Latin and Greek, which are well beyond my skill set. He gives an interpretation of those as well as dates and events, but his references are not extremely complete. A lot of coins missing out of there. Van Meter, which is kind of a very good introductory reference for ancient Roman imperial coinage, is very useful. It has a lot of the coins that are missing from Mattingly, but of course it lacks a lot of the historical context. About 14 years ago, I wrote an article for the Celator. Please be kind. I was just into coins at the time and didn't do such a great job in some of my interpretations. And then you'll find lots. I just gave one here, but if you Google Voda, you'll find lots of short guides out on the internet, which will give you some references and some coin examples to interesting types as well. So what are Voda? So they are promises made to the gods for help with a particular outcome. And they come in basically, you could say, two flavors. So the first is opening a contract. So this is where someone makes a promise that if the gods do something, they will in return dedicate something to the gods. So this is Vota Secepta, often done through the dedication of incense or some sort of wine or something. And then if that promise is returned by the gods, then we have the vote closing of the contract, which would be Vota Soluta. They were not really sacrifices to win favor as we might think of today, where you dedicate something and then the gods are supposed to return it. It was really kind of a very very transactional thing where the person making the voda agrees on what the price is in advance, and then if the gods accept it, then and grant it, then the gods give it. So a little bit different than we sometimes might think. Many were associated with regnal recognition, so time periods of rule, roughly on a 10-year cycle. Some often thought that this was a reference to Augusta agreeing to take honors and titles for only 10 years. Sometimes I like to think of it because we have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and so we're base 10. Occasionally there are also fives, so you'll see that as well. So we have the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, and 30-year voda, and those will be the ones that are commonly seen. Next, we also have voda publica, which were vows by the people, and then much less common were voda orbis, which were prayers for the world. So going back a second here to dating, dating conventions weren't always followed. Sometimes we'll see co-emperors who synchronized voda festivals. We have senior emperors exaggerating their years, their regnal years over junior emperors. And then, of course, there are several, like Julian, we'll see, who just didn't seem to think that 10 was really 10 and just maybe wanted to take credit for being in position for longer. So, once you start thinking about voda, you start to see them in many locations, in many different contexts. So taking an example of the vocabulary outside of coins, we of course have the Arch of Constantine. Constantine was crowned in 306 in York by his troops, and in 300 and in 15 AD, he went ahead and dedicated the Arch of Constantine in Rome. So being, you can actually they tended to celebrate their voda at the start of the 9th year going into the 10th. So this would be 9 years. So therefore it's his 10th regnal year. And so if you go to, as I said, if you go to Rome, you'll see the Arch of Constantine, which is over here by the Colosseum. It's actually to the north, I believe, northwest of the Colosseum a little bit. Then you'll see this, which is a voda soluta, so completing his first 10 years, and secepta, basically making a pledge for 10 more. It's obvious. It's the most obvious epigraphic voda that I can find. So if you look on the other side of the arch, not the side that faces the Colosseum, it very clearly has votus 10 and votus 20 on it. So he's making vows for having completed his first 10, and then he'll have the next 10 recognized there. On the side facing us, we have sic 10, sic 20. So as for the first 10, such as the second 10, there's some subtleties on the difference between votus and sic that is honestly lost on me, but many of the references say it would not have been lost on the contemporary Romans. So he doesn't actually say secepta and soluta again, but again, that would have been clear at the time. So now let's get into some of the coins, and I'll try to cover them more thematically as well, and not get into some of these anachronistic jumps ahead. So let's go ahead and start roughly from the beginning with Augustus. One of the first vota was issued, as I said, at Colonia Patricia under the empire, not during the republic. And this first coin is Suscepta, so being a request in advance for the safe return of Augustus from Gaul, and as I said, minted in Cordoba, Spain. There is a matching Arius, gold Arius, if you're if you are lucky enough to have one. And the vows are down here at the bottom here. So public vows undertaken wholly to Jupiter, best and greatest, for the well-being and return of the emperor. Um, so then we go to some coins that are saluta, right? So in recognition of vows that have been made. The first is a little long-winded. Always impressed with what the Romans are able to squeeze onto a coin. This particular one says the Senate and the Roman people have addressed vows to the best and greatest Jupiter for the preservation of the supreme commander and Caesar in acknowledgement of his reestablishment of the Republic in a better, richer, happier, and more tranquil condition. Wow, that's quite a bit. So Mattingly identified a total of 6 vota in this on this general topic, but I would probably add one more to that. This particular one is in recognition of the standards that Augustus recovered from the Parthians. Those were standards that were taken in battles fought by Mark Antony and Crassus, which were lost in this. And he went ahead and was able to negotiate with the Parthians to get those standards back, and then he dedicated them in the temple of Mars Ultor. Here is a representation on a coin of that. Of course, it's a little this the temple of Mars Ultor was not a round temple. This is a round temple. I don't exactly understand why that is, but Mars Ultor was definitely Augustus's patron god, and so this would be a very obviously appropriate interpretation of the coin. We then have a very large gap in vota recognitions, at least on coins in legends. But there were other vota-like reginal anniversaries celebrated, of course, with large issues of gold and silver, and then some currency reforms that suggest reginal years were recognized. But as I said, in terms of vota legends, there's this large gap. And the next one is associated with Trajan. This one has some dating issues, as I had said before. Usually these are recognized every 10 years. This particular coin was issued on Trajan's 12th anniversary of his reign, vowing for another 10 years, since it's obviously a suscepta issue, which is, of course, requests in advance. So, and on it we see a personification of the Senate here and of the Roman people, and then a sacrifice of either looks like incense or libation. So that fits again with a votus suscepta in advance. And the reverse of this coin is high priest, holder of tribunical power, consul for the 6th time, father of the nation, the Senate, and the Roman people, vota suscepta. So they were very good with these shortened legends on coins. I wonder how good they would be developing modern acronyms with funny meanings. I don't know. And then, of course, if you're going to talk about Trajan or Hadrian for that matter, you have to cover their hometown of Italica, which is just a few miles north of Seville. It was the river apparently shifted, I believe, is the story, and so as a result, the town was abandoned, and no other town was built on top of it. So you have a lot of the ruins there that you can view. I have a picture here of the arena. Which was used in the Game of Thrones. I don't watch the Game of Thrones. Maybe I should. I've been visiting a lot of the sites where they film them in Spain. But anyway, we got there very early in the morning, which I would highly recommend, and had the site basically to ourselves. You also have several examples of mosaics. Here is the House of the Bird. There's also the House of the Planetarium, which has a mosaic floor of different celestial gods. And then you have one well-preserved, well, moderately well-preserved set of toilets. So always have to take a peek at the toilets. So as I said, in addition to Vota Suscepta and Soluta, we also have Vota Publica, which is basically a subtype of those two. And on this slide, I have two coins. I'm only showing the first coin first, but I have one of each for Hadrian. The first coin is an example of Vota Publica that is Suscepta. It was minted in 119 AD, and Hadrian's reign started in 117 AD, so it's Vota Suscepta Decennialia. Then on the second coin, we also have a Vota Publica, and there's some debate on what's actually being recognized or requested of the gods. Curtis Clay dated it to 132 AD, and I think that's based on the obverse here. So that would be Vota Soluta for a trip that Hadrian made to the east in 130 to 132 AD. Although I actually couldn't really figure out if he really made it back to Rome or not, or went directly to Judea to fight in the wars there. I always really like the coins of Hadrian. I like his obverses, and this one, the reverse, is really not too hard to interpret. It's clearly Vota Suscepta. So Hadrian's reign started, as I said before, in 117 AD, and this coin was minted in 136, 137 after the 20th anniversary. So it's Vota Suscepta, so vows for the next 30 years, or for his 30 years, so going 10 years into the future. It's really a pretty, as you can tell, it's pretty amazing portrait here on the obverse. It's credited to a die engraver referred to as Alpheus Master. Some speculate that it could be the sculptor Antonianus of Aphrodisia. That's kind of convenient because he's the only artist known to have actually signed any of his works on Antinius, who was Hadrian's lover. So that sounds pretty speculative. Here is the example of that carving, and you can't really see it very well, but on this altar we have Antonianus of Aphrodisia's signature here. Pretty speculative, but that's the way it sometimes goes in antiquities. So as we've seen so far, we still only have either Suscepta or Soluta on a coin, but not yet an innovation of putting them both together. And even if the coins for each were issued at the same time, we don't see them on the same coin. And that's the example I have here for Antoninus Pius. This particular first coin is pretty darn hard to read. Unfortunately, I don't have one to take a better picture, but it is Soluta. So Antoninus Pius's reign started in 138 AD, and this particular coin was minted, as you can see down here, in about 158 AD, so 20 years. So it's Vota Soluta in recognition of his first 20 years. Not knowing a lot of Latin, sometimes I think they invent vocabulary for the Romans that maybe didn't exist. But But for decennialia, that clearly existed. There's the term right there. So we have Saluda decennialia 2. Not exactly sure why they didn't use vicennialia, which would be for 20. It would certainly have been easier to carve into the die, but that's what they did. And then for our next coin, again, I have to apologize. It's a little hard to read, but as a current issue, so these two coins issued at the same time, we have a Vota Suscepta tricennialia. So this is requesting in advance for the next 10 years. So we have Vota Suscepta decennialia 3 this time. So no, not tricennialia. I believe tricennialia. Yeah. But that's what we have on the coins. So as I said again, Saluda and Suscepta issued at the same time, but not mixed on the same coin. So before we get to Suscepta and Saluda on the same coin and potential confusions there, we have a definite intentional confusion by Septimius Severus with his son Caracalla on Vota dates for to synchronize. The goal here was to synchronize their Suscepta for the festivals together, but clearly Septimius Severus wanted to seem much more senior to his son Caracalla, so he adjusted the dates. So on these coins, we have the emperors both dedicating incense, reinforcing the Vota Suscepta. Septimius Severus is Suscepta 20, whereas Caracalla is Suscepta 10. But Severus was his regnal year was 193, and Caracalla was 198. So only 5 years difference in regnal years, but we have obviously a 10-year difference on the coin. So in these coins, he's trying to really show he's much more senior to his son. Then unrelated, we have Porgetta. So in 202, he was issuing a Vota Saluda coin that I thought I would just toss in after 5 years. Of course, Caracalla and Geta did not issue any coins together since they didn't get along that well. And then of course Caracalla eventually kills Geta in front of his family. So not I don't know that Vota doesn't seem to have worked for poor Geta here. So talking about Vota that weren't answered, now we have the ladies, and they did not do well at all in terms of having their Vota answered. Votas for the women are much less common and much harder to attribute. So the first two I have here are for Lucilla. So she was the second daughter of Marcus Aurelius, and as I said, whatever vows she made, they weren't enough because the gods definitely did not deliver on either of her requests, we'll see. So this particular coin was issued on her marriage to Lucius Verus, and of course, they were married in 164 AD, and Verus died just 5 years later in 169 AD. Then there was a second coin issued. There are several references to this coin being in recognition of her second marriage to Claudius Pupienus. Can't laugh without saying that name. But anyway, and as I there's some controversy over whether this was really when this coin was issued. Pupienus was not in the royal family, so recent literature seems to suggest that they would probably not have issued a coin recognizing a marriage that wasn't royal. Anyway, things didn't get much better for her because she was eventually executed by her brother Commodus, and her son was later murdered by Caracalla. She did do a lot better posthumously in the movie Gladiator. At least in that case, she didn't get to marry her general, but she did outlive Commodus. The next one's a little unusual. It's for Fausta, who was the wife of Constantine the Great. The back of the coin here you can see is thought to be a mule of the reverse of Constantine the Second coin. So the purpose of this coin is not super clear. Personally, I don't find it to be a very attractive obverse. It just seems a little suspicious to me, but I can be overly judgy, and maybe I haven't handled enough of these coins. And then finally, we have a coin of Honoria, who was the sister of Valentinian III. And as you can see, it's vote 20 MVLT, which I'll get to in a minute here. I don't want to get anachronistic again, but so she was born in 418 AD, and this coin was then only minted when she was only 12 years old. So obviously it's not a Vota 20 for her. It's not really clear, similar to the Fausta coin, what was being suggested. It's possible these were vows honoring the entire royal family, the women in the royal family, which would make more sense. And like Lucilla, she didn't turn out so great for her. Things didn't turn out so great for her either. She was the one who sent a pledge ring to Attila the Hun, so he could claim her and the Western Empire. That didn't work out, and her eventual death isn't recorded, but it's thought that she wasn't around past 455 AD, which would have been age 37. So, as I said, vows didn't work out so great for the women at least not in the later empire. So, although I alluded to it in the last slide, now we finally get to Suscepta and Saluta on the same coins. The first example of this is Gallienus. Here we have a vote 10 et 20. So basically Vota, Suscepta for the first 2 years, and vows for the next 10 years. Then we have one by Crassus, which is the first to use the MVLT, although he doesn't actually have the first part of the vote. He just has the MVLT. So essentially that's and more. So Vota 10 Saluta together with Vota 10 Suscepta is what he's saying. Again, didn't work out too well for him either. So he was a usurper in Britain and Northern Gaul, and the vows didn't seem to help him, prevent him from being murdered after 7 years. So once you start seeing votas on coins and you start to understand them, as I said, you start to now see them all over the place. I was watching a Roman archaeological lecture the other day, and they mentioned the decennial monument, or also called the 5-column monument of the Tetrarchy, near the Rostra in Rome. They said that all that's left is the base of one of the columns. And I thought to myself, hey, I've been there. I have some pictures. Was I there? And lo and behold, I went back and dug through my photos, and there it was, accidentally taking a picture of it here by the Arch of Septimius Severus. And here's the base right here, you can see. Didn't even know I had seen it. So how do they know that it's the 5-column monument? Well, on the actual Arch of Constantine, which we saw before, there actually is one of the friezes on the top that shows the 5 columns. So we have Jupiter in the center on one of those columns, and then the other 4 tetrarchs. And then, as you can see right here, you can see it's decennial written into the base of one of those, in the remaining base of that monument. Then under the Tetrarchy, we get a flood open to different styles under the Vota. So So here we've got they're kind of hard to read. I apologize, but the first two are Diocletian, and the first one it actually says I'll just read it out because it's you can't read it. Primus 10, multis 20. So for the first 10 years, more for the second 10. Then that's actually yeah Primus 20. Then we've got vote 10 M 20. So again, same sort of thing. Uh, as for the first 10, more for the second 10. Then under Maximian, we have SIC, so sick. As for the first 20, so for the next 10. And I don't have one of them here, but there's also one that's vote 10 FEL, so fell, hooray for the decennial. So we start to see many different types under the tetrarchy. So then under the later empire, we also see a profusion of the way that vota are depicted. In this case, under Constantine the Great, we have vote 20 on a flag between captives. We have vote PR on a shield, which is hope for the Roman people. Also under Constantine the Great, we've got votus 20 inscribed on an altar. This one's kind of unusual. This is a coin issued for under Gratian, and it's vote 5 MVL 10 inscribed on a shield being held up by two emperors with a small child. The reason I find it very interesting is that it matches very closely, if not exactly, with a reverse issued by Valentinian. And on that reverse, Gratian, who is the emperor here, was actually the little boy under the shield. So it's not clear why Gratian would want to repeat that reverse. It's almost like him showing himself as a child as opposed to an adult. And this particular coin is not listed in Mattingly, so it's a little strange coin. And then we of course have the habitual example of someone who didn't seem to like to follow the dating standards. So this one we have is Julian, and it's with vote 20 on a shield. This is a 9 siliqua coin, which is I read says it's an odd denomination. It's an odd fraction that didn't divide itself well into other coins issued at the time, and so it would have been hard to make change, but it's a little smaller than some of the other gold coins, and so it seemed to fit with trying to mint a bunch of coins for a celebration. Again, this one is very hard to fit into a historical context. Julian is very famous for notoriously switching up his regnal dates with his Caesars and Augustuses. He was only a Caesar for 5 years and an emperor for 3. So how he makes it to Secepta 20 is less than clear, but probably great for publicity. And then finally, we get to a series that I have been collecting for a number of years, kind of in the background, and that is Theodosius I. He issued a significant number of vota in very distinct orders. So vota 5, vote 5 multiple 10, then 10 multiple 20, 15, 20, and as you can see, goes all the way up to vote 20 multiple 30, and he goes by 5-year fractions. So it's a fairly fun collection to try to pull together. It's a little challenging because these are a bit hard to find. Because they're such low value coins, they tend to be in lots, or you have to spend a lot of money to win them in auctions if they are fairly well defined in the auction. This particular coin I was looking for about I don't know, probably about 12 years, and finally found it in an auction just a couple of months ago. I also saw this one in an auction. This is a 10 multiple 30, which is very odd because it obviously doesn't go by 10-year increments. Or it goes by 10-year increments, but it's not a 2030. It was only issued in Antioch, and it's not listed in any of the coin references that I've been able to find. Then the final coin, which I also was not able to locate for a long time, was this Vote 5. I finally found that about a month ago at an auction. So now I have to decide, do I want to now move off to collecting the the different mints, or do I want to move on to something else? Chances are I'll just kind of follow this one in the background, and when I see mints, I'll probably just end up filling them in. So I want to thank you for your attention. I know I probably wandered a bit. I hope I was able to convey that while the Roman Vota might appear pretty plain on the surface, they kind of tend to look repetitive if you're not paying attention. But the messaging and the related history and the community debate can make them a lot of fun, and especially for early collectors who maybe don't have a big bankroll and are looking for things to find in lots or in the low value coin bins, and want to start learning the history of the different emperors. So thanks for your time.